All right, it's about 1 minute after. We're going to get rolling here. I appreciate everyone's attendance today at the third in our series of webcasts called the Smart Shippers 2022. My name is Ron Lee. I'm the host for today's session. I'm super excited for the panelists that I'll introduce here in a minute. Today, this session is all really about talking shop about shipping. We'd like you to take away some ideas and strategies to consider in your own shipping environment to help you deliver better fulfillment as we round out 2022. We're going to touch on some wide-ranging topics. We've got four main themes we're going to go through, but we're going to touch on shipping, opportunities, problems, technology, integrating with systems. So we've got lots and lots of ground to cover in the next 45 minutes here. So I want to introduce, I'm very excited for the panelists that we have here. Amanda Armendariz, the editor of PARCEL Industry. We've also got Sean McCarthy, the director of the UPS Ready program, and Vaughn Proctor is a channel account manager with Netstock. So we've got a great set of expertise here with lots of experience in the industry in their particular areas. I'm going to let each of them give you a quick introduction. Amanda, you want to go first?
Sure. As Ron said, my name is Amanda Armendariz. I am the editor of PARCEL Media. We are a free trade publication that covers basically every aspect of the supply chain and logistics industry, obviously focusing specifically on the small package aspect. So order entry to warehousing to final delivery to returns. We just, strive really hard to be the industry resource that shippers turn to for information to optimize their business.
Great. Sean, better up.
Yeah, good afternoon. I'm Sean McCarthy. I'm the UPS director for the UPS Ready program. And our program basically is a connective tissue between our customers and our back-end technology that we work with partners like PaceJet, who uses those connections through APIs and such to make things happen, make the magic happen, and be able to create those labels and track those packages through our technologies.
Make the magic happen. I like that. Vaughn, last but not least, you want to do a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name's Vaughn Proctor. I'm from a company called Netstock. We are a supply chain planning company. We provide software and services for demand planning, inventory planning, and optimization. And we integrate with ERPs, really just around optimizing supply chain and inventory.
Great. Well, thank you very much. Well, we've got four topics that we're going to walk through here just to kind of help us tee up the conversation this afternoon. Then we'll wrap it up here in this session. It should take us about 45 minutes. And then just a little bit of housekeeping here. At the end, we'll have a recording of the session. So if you're interested in sharing that with anyone else on your team that missed it, everyone who's in attendance today will get a copy of that. All right, so I'm going to start. Our first topic here, in the news has been everything all about ports and congestion at the ports and its impact, sort of the bullwhip effect in and around the economy, impacting shippers across the board. One of my colleagues at PaceJet, Chris Evans, he had spotted an article that called it the Disneyland effect, which I thought was pretty good. This idea that as areas in the supply chain get congested, people are running around finding another avenue to try to deliver, which just like running around at the lines at Disney World, it doesn't always work. You get in line with a new resource and you're kind of stuck there. So for the panelists, what's your view on kind of where we're at with congestion, and what are you hearing about what people are doing to kind of deal with this effect? So anyone want to start? Or Amanda, you want to go first? What are you hearing at the top level in the industry?
Yeah, so we actually just ran an article on this maybe 4 or 5 weeks ago, and the general consensus was congestion is going to be a big deal into 2023, at least the first few months of the new year. Like you noted, some ports are clearing up congestion, and that's good, but then there's often that effect, which, as a side note, I laughed calling it the Disneyland effect because my kids know that that's my thing, is checking the app. We're like, we're going to run to this ride. We're going to run to this ride. And so it's funny to hear that, shippers are doing the same thing on obviously a much bigger basis. So yeah, congestion is going to be a big thing for a long time. So obviously, it sounds simplistic, but planning ahead, seeing what you can do to better utilize container usage, communicating with your customers and anyone in your supply chain just about, what's happening is really the best that people can do. But unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's going to be a super quick fix anytime soon.
So bad news not letting up anytime soon, but good news, people are starting to figure out some ways to deal with it.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Sean, what do you think? What are you hearing?
Yeah, so I actually had an interesting conversation with another UPS Ready partner the other day, and they were talking about really moving upstream with a particular customer that they were helping provide some guidance with, and they were talking about the communication and the exactness of making some decisions, and specifically they were saying, oh, instead of going to Long Beach, go to Houston, right? Well, in order to make that decision, there was a lot of other things that they had to talk about in terms of ship size, going through the Panama Canal, timing. And even though it might take longer, what they're saying is it's better than, 4 or 5 days longer is better than sitting for 30 or 60 days off the coast there. So, but in order for that to happen, it was a very complicated and specific communication that needed to happen. So I thought that was a really creative way to get upstream in it, to think ahead, not by days, but by months, and really think about how they would work with that from origin to destination.
That's a great perspective on it. So the planning ahead and visibility ahead, it's going to start to press on the topics we're talking about, integrated technology to help you do that as part of the effort.
That's right.
Bon, what do you think? Netstock's sort of in the thick of planning, how to get a better sense of staging inventory and all that. What are you hearing? What do you think in this area?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we see a lot of customers that are dealing with these extended lead times, like you said, the bullwhip effect and what effect that has on their inventory holding, and also the effect on availability. And being able to plan throughout the supply chain becomes very important. Having visibility of what's going on at every point is really, really important. So the job of the inventory planners have become so much more important and so much more difficult in the volatility that we've seen.
Yeah, that's interesting. One of the stats that I saw that tied right into what we're talking about here is there's a tendency. It was about logistics cost versus inventory carrying costs. And I was kind of surprised because we all know logistics costs have gone up over the last year or so, six months to 12 months, the cost of transportation. But the inventory carrying costs have gone up 26% across the industry when you look at it. So it may, if we might have thought the idea of just creating some big piles of inventory so you don't have shortages would work, doesn't seem like that's a good idea either. So you gotta kind of balance it out and figure out what you hold to deal with the uncertainty, but also I think what we're all saying, how to deal with accelerating, some planning and then execution beyond that. So that's pretty interesting. Any other thoughts in this area, in congestion or anything else you're hearing? All right, good. We'll move on to the next topic. The other topic then, I think this one, we were going to zero in a little bit on parcel growth, the expansion of parcel growth. And, one thing I find fascinating about this, I've been, like many of us, been watching the e-commerce growth for now since, 9 or 10 years, the expansion of it. And I saw a stat yesterday that was comparing different countries at the level of e-commerce that they're at. And you have places like Singapore that's I think it's above 80%. China's north of 50%, and the U.S. is like at 19% of all retail sales or e-commerce now, which is pretty fascinating. Now, COVID, added fuel to that fire, and we saw, parcel basically go from, I think it was almost 22 billion, 21.5 billion in 2020, up from 20 billion in 2020. So I thought coming into this year, we wouldn't see double-digit growth. We wouldn't continue, but a lot of the metrics out there are still suggesting that we could see a CAGR, compound annual growth rate, of double digits still, 10, 11% for the next 5 years, which is pretty fascinating. So when it comes to volume and the growth and how people are dealing with it, that's the question. What are we seeing out there, and what are people thinking about it? Sean, you want to go first? What are you thinking from a UPS perspective?
Yeah, thanks, Ron. So, from our perspective, there's definitely, I think, continued demand, right, for those services. And peak this year is going to be really interesting. I know we're probably I can't have a conversation without talking about peak this time of year, right? Yep. And so our position has been just making sure the network is flexible enough to be able to handle all those different volumes and changes that are going on. So, from our perspective, we see continued strong growth, but there's definitely some softness in the economy.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we've seen bubble up as a higher priority with our customers for PaceJet users that are looking at technology for managing shipping is alignment of the classes of service and the transit times in their execution more tightly.
That's right.
When a customer places an order, knowing, all right, if it's ground, here's what you're going to do. If I need to do a more accelerated time frame, what am I going to get? And am I really capturing the quote to do that? And just more real-time alignment there.
Yeah, there's definitely more of that. I think I probably said it in a prior call, hyper personalization, right? Like finding the right solution, whether it be a time in transit need or a price point need or a service level, that feeling of security maybe around something getting there faster. So all of those things really drive into what the end selection is. And, as a overall theme here, technology enables that, right?
Mm-hmm. The other thing that's just sparked a thought for me on this upfront promising, I think of the committing part of this equation, and I'm going to ask you in a second, Vaughn, about packaging and fulfillment and inventory, maybe how that factors in some of what you see. But I've often thought of this front end promising to customers about a shipping, service, speed, and cost as sort of the Goldilocks problem. Someone goes to your website and they say they're going to buy something. You've got to give them a price for a service, for a shipping service. And if it's too high, you'll lose the business. And if the price you quote is too low, you'll wish you did, because you'll lose margin on the sale, right? Because you wouldn't have accounted for the right. So things like what we see is things like predictive packing now are more mainstream technology, where someone fills up their shopping cart and it goes to do quoting and it says, well, this is going to be a 2-box shipment, which is more precisely aligned with the cost. So that's the kind of stuff we're seeing, that, better alignment, like Sean, you were saying, with the options, the service classes, but also better predictive data, so that when you ask, electronically, when your software asks UPS, what are my options? It's a better, tighter cost, because you're using better data, so they can give you a better price that's aligned. So I think this kind of pressure points on are interesting. Sivan, what do you see in this space, in parcel and demand, and how do people get ahead of the curve, and how do they get their warehouses ready with the right inventory in the right spot? What do you think?
Well, I think it's really difficult. I mean, as I said, the planning becomes essential. If you don't have the right tools, you don't understand, you don't have the right inventory in the right place at the right time. You don't understand when that inventory is going to arrive, and with the bottlenecks that we're seeing, what effect that has on that availability to your customer, and then obviously the cost of holding that. So you touched on people holding a lot of stock to make sure that the service is there, and then those inventory holding costs that have increased so much really eats into those margins. So it's important to collaborate with your suppliers. And as I said, have visibility throughout the supply chain to ensure that you can maximize your profits, right? So having just the right amount of inventory is really, really important.
Are you seeing an aggregate, or people kind of, are they building up some buffer stock in anticipation of the end of the year? I know we have a peak season topic we're going to talk about here in a minute, but are you seeing that? I mean, it's certainly been in the news. Are you seeing that?
Definitely, and therein lies the problem. As I said, it's increasing that stock and having a buffer stock for this period, but at the same time making sure that you don't end up holding too much, and those inventory costs rise. And then having to I take the Target example, where they then had to reduce prices on items to then dump that stock to make sure that the inventory holding costs aren't too high. So it's a balancing act the whole way through, right?
Yeah, we live in weird and interesting times, I guess, because we come out of this COVID, we blast out of COVID, and suddenly there's shortages and inflation, and everybody's like, hurry up, we can't get it in fast enough, we're missing the orders. And then it seems like 2 weeks later, or a couple weeks later, you've got Target and Walmart canceling billions of dollars worth of orders because they got the wrong stuff in the wrong spot. And they're so it's an interesting problem that a lot of companies are dealing with.
Yeah, and if you think about businesses that size, and if they can get it wrong, you really have to be on top of things to make sure that you get it right.
Mhm. Amanda, what's the buzz in the industry that you're seeing in this space and parcel demand and what's top of mind for people?
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Sean and Vaughn touched on a lot of that, especially as it relates to supply chain visibility. Obviously, that's key. That's always been important, right? But I would say even more so now, given the shortages and everything that is happening. I mean, I think companies are doing kind of whatever they can to get ahead of the game and really like optimize their supply chain. Obviously, they're looking at ways to retain, labor. That's if you have a huge turnover rate in your distribution center, that's going to really impact your operations. So things like making sure, labor retention is good, focusing on the right kinds of automation. I feel like sometimes people think automation is just a code word for replacing, the human workforce. And a lot of times that's simply not the case. Automation can help, the human workforce do their jobs more effectively, which is going to improve the supply chain overall. So I really feel like companies are looking into, what would be the best investment for my people and my company to really help us, get ahead of these challenges. And then a lot of people are also, focusing on sustainability. And sometimes sustainability is seen as something that you could kind of kick the can down the road a little bit, right? Like we'll worry about that later. But I think in this day and age, a lot of companies are really seeing it's something that has to be top of mind. If their supply chain is not sustainable, eventually a lot of customers are going to leave. They want people, or they want to buy from, companies that are environmentally friendly and, ship with a conscience and all that. So I think that's obviously it's not a quick fix, but that's something that a lot of companies are really looking at. If their sustainability practices are not, maybe what they should be, they need to be within the next, 2 to 3 years, because that's becoming more and more top of mind for customers every day.
Wow, okay, that touches on a lot of topics there.
I
I mean,
know.
that's
I just kind of rolled them out there.
Yeah, you did. I mean, I was thinking about we had a customer. I just saw their store. It's a company called Topo Designs, and they make sort of this new outdoor stuff. It's kind of cool products. But I walked through their store at the Denver airport just like Thursday, I think it was. I was looking at their products and into the warehouse staffing. One of the benefits for them of implementing some new technology was I think the industry average right now of turnover in a warehouse is like 46%, 46%.
Sounds about right.
And they got their turnover down to 11%. And part of it is, to your point on labor, it's not only it's automating the things that are error prone and difficult, and then redirecting talent on things that can make a difference. More things that on the speed, how many orders can they do? So put them in a position where they can be more successful. They'll feel more successful. They'll stay with you. They don't, because people are people. They don't want to be unsuccessful. And if the technology is too hard to use, it made me think of that. But that's a great example of that. The other one that came to mind on what you were bringing up on planning, we have on sustainability. We've seen, I don't know, I'll put it out to others here in a second. We've seen a much stronger interest in that too. And it really aligns with the technology initiatives. So if you sort of connect the dots, if you can predict the packaging up front better on an order, if you can then drive that in planning in the warehouse, so you're actually doing fewer shipments, let's say consolidating those shipments, and you probably can deliver them faster, and you can do it with less labor, and you can reduce your carbon footprint as well. So there is a connection on all this stuff, which is pretty interesting in this. Any other thoughts? So peak season, it's upon us. So what do we do? I guess that's the third topic as we drill down in this in preparing for the year end. It's hard to believe the summer's almost over. I was saying before we started the webcast, I refuse to acknowledge the end of the summer. So I'm going to hang in here for another week, maybe before I have to, after Labor Day, before I'll acknowledge it. But so, as we think about all that volume of parcel, all the challenges here with sort of the constraints coming in the front end, people have to start thinking, how do I get ready for the end of the year? How do I prepare my business, and what do I do to get ready? So what do you think? Vaughn, you want to take this one first on peak season? A little bit?
Well, I think again it comes down to the availability and having the inventory there when it needs to go out to the customer. With increased demand over this period and having the right inventory, and at the same time, as you were saying, being able to optimize to make sure that we're cutting costs on warehousing and shipping and all of that type of stuff. And it all, as you mentioned, also ties into sustainability, but throughout the supply chain, right? And planning and having the inventory there to be able to ship in time is going to be critical through this time. At the same time, increasing the stock for the demand that's coming in. So very tricky, but technology helps a lot with this. And you spoke about replacing people. Technology really is an enabler, especially in supply chain now, for people to be more effective at what they do.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting as we've been touching on elements of peak season. When in terms of the PaceJet landscape, we tend to peak on a given day. We'll get up to 200 to 400 shipments a minute, maybe twice, 3 times that on a really busy day across different aspects of our network. It'll 2x, 3x, at certain points. And it used to be that was it was really Black Friday driven. That's what we used to talk about. Like we say, don't touch anything in the Black Friday period on the system, no upgrades, nothing like that, because you're in that window. But now I've heard it's the Cyber 5. It's the 5 days when you think about between Black Friday, Cyber Monday, that whole period. Is there anything that you're all seeing in that space? I mean, the stretching out of when the intensity happens at the end of the year. Anything interesting that anyone else is seeing?
Well, for me, here at UPS, it's actually at the back end is kind of, really an emerging area that a lot of focus is being paid to now. And that's around the returns.
Right.
And preparing for that, that's almost a second peak in the retail world, is all those packages coming back into inventory. And I have to imagine from a stocking standpoint that it becomes very important around what to do with that inventory. Where does it go? You talk about some of the challenges on the front end here, Vaughn, but what about on the back end, where now you have even more inventory coming back? And is it the right inventory? Does it end up back in the right place? How do you use that as an asset moving forward? So there's a lot of technology and a lot of partners that we deal with where that's kind of a focus of what they're trying to enable and trying to find the best solution for both the merchant and the customer. And so you all help us make those connections to them.
That's a great one. I think last stat I saw in that area, it's almost 23%, 24%, something like that of online orders end up with a return. It was bigger than I thought on it. I don't know if that's the exact number, but that's a very good point. If you think of, so you're probably going to get hit with that in the December and early January part, depending on when people, when the peaks happen.
Right. And really, just to, Amanda's mentioned it a few times here too. It's the preparation around that, right? So you can't wait until Cyber Monday to start thinking about Cyber Monday. And that means, and you can't think about it yourself. It's all about talking to your partners, whether that be a carrier like UPS, whether that be a warehousing or a technology partner. All that work has to happen early. You can't do it in a vacuum. So it's really important that it's a team effort moving forward. And so, I talk about after peak. So you should be thinking about returns as part of the go-to-market strategy before.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know we see examples to me of there's getting your systems in place to do the outbound orders, but then you can do things on the technology to say, well, let's say I want to do a pre-printed return label, for example, and I've not done that before, and I want to just make sure that's available for customers. That may be one strategy to decide to do that this year, and decide where are you going to route those returns, to your point, when you do that pre-printed return label for different customer groups. So you've got some control over that. That's an example of one I've seen some more use of that in our customer base. Another, trying to think of specific optimizations I think are popular in this space, John. One is creating, minimizing your outbound paperwork on these e-commerce orders, where let's say you combine a packing list with a label, so that you're not only reducing the carbon footprint that you talked about, Amanda, but making it a lot easier for the folks in the warehouse to process outbound shipments. There's just less and less to worry about. And
you listen in the broader sense, when you think about peak, it really comes down to supply and demand. And it's going to come down to, there's going to be limited, packages that can be handled by all the vendors and all the carriers. And so how do you make sure that your packages are at the right place at the right time? And that comes down to planning ahead. That comes down to looking at truly the full SLA that you have available in terms of when your commitments are to your customer. And then how do you manage within that full time frame, whether it be in the warehouse, whether it be in the CRM system or ERP system, virtually, or doing it utilizing different shipping services.
You mentioned SLA, and it triggered a thought for me, because that is a very important concept. That now is the time. If we often talk about the upside of, if you look at your process now and you critically decide, where are my mistakes, where are the points in the process that it's fragile, that it might break under load. There's some great books out there on this concept of being anti-fragile business, coming up with ways and analyzing ways in your business, places it might break under pressure, and figuring out how to make them more resilient for that. And this would be a great time. For example, compliance, the SLA, if you have to do shipments to retailers that require EDI, that require labeling, now might be the time to take a look at all that and figure out, are we getting chargebacks that are not in line with what we're expecting, and other kinds of scalability parameters. So that's a great point on that. Others have any thoughts to weigh in on that? On peak season preparation, things people could be doing to get ready?
So we actually just ran an article on that in our last issue. And if anyone's curious to read it, it's on our homepage right now, PARCELindustry.com. And it's just 6 tips for peak season planning. And obviously I won't go into all of them here in detail, but I think our writer did a really good job of summarizing exactly how you can prepare for, well, really any peak season, but specifically this one. Things like educate your executive team about factors that are beyond your control, but that will likely impact your operations, right? Like fuel surcharges, the global economy, port congestion, like we talked about earlier. Just making them aware of, what's not that they're not aware, but if you can lay it out, this is how this could specifically impact our operations. That's going to help you guys get a jump on things. Things like identifying underperforming lanes, right? Getting ahead of that now, and seeing how you can fix those prior to peak season, or considering alternative carriers, not in place of UPS or FedEx or the Postal Service, but just as a supplement, right? Regional carriers, and again, that's something where you would not want to wait until last minute, because they are definitely filling up just as fast as some of the main carriers. But so again, like you said, it goes back to that preparation, right? The sooner you can get on top of things, the sooner you can prepare for as many eventualities as you can anticipate, the better off you're going to be.
That is a great segue, Amanda, to our last topic, which is carrier diversification.
Wonderful.
So, thinking about the capacity side of this, how do you make a choice, and how do you work the balance into it? So I'll run around. I'll start with you, Vaughn, and second on your perspectives on this, where you see customers looking at carriers. But I think when I think about our customers, the PaceJet customers and their use, we're seeing a view towards, as you grow, almost you could think of them as programs, delivery programs by type of customer or by type of product, where you figure out who's the best carrier to fit a particular profile of delivery. And it could be geography, it could be service, it could be different things. So that's where you might pick a different mix of carriers that you apply. There's a lot more interest in doing that. Sort of the classic view is, well, I might want to add a carrier to rate shop, but that's not really the sense anymore. It's more of options and choice and service levels, I think. Vaughn, what do you think in this topic? Carrier diversification. What are you seeing and what do you think?
Well, I think it's important to partner with a technology solution to enable you to diversify. Make it easier to deliver, as you said, across different carriers, to make sure that you're optimizing that, right?
Okay. Amanda, what's your take? Anything more to add on diversification? We touched on it a little bit.
Yeah, but just really analyze your shipping profile. For example, we talked about e-commerce growing so much, right? So the Postal Service is a great option a lot of times for e-commerce shippers, especially if you have lightweight packages, right? Like they tend to be less expensive than a lot of the other carriers. So, and a lot of people sometimes think like, oh, the Postal Service, what? That could be a great option for that segment of your business, right? Whereas, regional carriers, especially if you have a huge customer base in a specific part of the country, well, maybe for that segment, you're going to reach out to a regional carrier and see about diverting some of your business there. But again, it's all about just, starting the conversation, reaching out to your carrier reps, telling them what you anticipate for peak season and beyond. And just, start the conversation. I feel like sometimes people are maybe scared to reach out. Like they don't want to hear like, oh, we can't do that, or, oh, that's going to be, difficult or whatever, but just, start talking and develop a true relationship with your representative. And that usually is going to work out for your benefit.
So leverage that expertise that the carrier brings to the table about what is great about their network and their service.
Right, exactly.
That's probably a good segue for you, Sean. What's your take on that? Use of multiple carriers.
I don't like it. I don't think we should do it. No.
Well, we love UPS best of all.
So my response to that is really, and you touched on it, it's diversification in your options, right? It's diversification in the services you use, whether it be ground or air, 1 day, 2 day, but then tying that back, like I said earlier, to really your commitment levels and capacity within your entire supply chain. And so, and then again, early communication, working with the carriers, because like in our specific case, we may not be able to take a bunch of air packages on a particular day, but we can take some ground packages a day before, a day after, or something like that, and still meet the SLAs that you need for your customers. So there's really a lot of opportunity, but that opportunity means communication. It means having technology and visibility available to you, and then be able to apply it and apply it quickly.
I think that your point on the technology is that, I think when we talk with customers, our customer base, about evaluating tech, there is the factor of service levels and price and cost, but there's also the technology side. You look at a carrier like UPS, you guys have a very strong bench in technology when it comes to when the systems are under stress, which they're going to be. At the end of the year, they're going to be under stress, the availability of capacity, but also just if your e-commerce site can't get a quote when you need one, you're going to lose that order. So you sort of got to have some experience and think about the use of the technology, not only in the day-to-day, but when it's under pressure during this peak season. So I think that's a good point.
Yeah. And you're right. That's one of the things that we're paying attention to as we prepare for peak, is how do we make sure that we have the right infrastructure available in the right place, so that we can optimize our supply that's available and align it with the demand. Yeah,
I haven't envied. I follow, like a lot of people, I follow the investments that UPS is making in infrastructure, and I don't envy the $1 billion price tags that you're spending on it. But clearly, you're beefing up the infrastructure to be able to deal with this kind of stuff. So that's a great. I wanted one more thought in this topic on the area of carrier diversification. I mean, maybe it's an odd fit, but Amanda, you brought up labor, and we talked about that a little bit in one of the other topics. And I think one of the prep things that we see is in the end of year peak, it's likely that you may need some additional staff during that period. You see it in the news, some of the bigger fulfillment environments where they're hiring, thousands of workers to help out. And one of the sort of stress points that I think it would be good for this audience to think about is when you need to add staff, how are you going to do it, and how quickly can they come up to speed, and how can they deal with a carrier portfolio if your shipping is not as uniform between multiple carriers. If you're using a portfolio like you were talking about, Amanda, in maybe you're using regional carriers and you're using UPS for a core, and then you're using another carrier for certain types of fast services. That's kind of some different ways of shipping, different services. Is there anything you're seeing, Amanda, in terms of as people think about labor and preparing for the end of year? Particular tips?
Yeah, I mean, that is obviously a concern. How do you get people up to speed and quickly? You don't want to be, shipping out the wrong product or having people, performing slowly. And as always, I think, technology can be a huge part of that. I know there's a lot of, software out there that can basically you put in the package, dimensions and where it's going and whatever, and then it can basically choose the correct carrier for you. And the correct service. And so for someone who's, just getting onboarded to a distribution center, that's probably one of the best options that, a warehouse is going to have, because it's pretty intuitive. It's pretty user friendly. And then there's no second guessing, like, well, should I send it this way? Should I send it this way? So, I mean, technology is not the answer to everything, obviously, but in this case, I think it makes sense.
Yeah. We've certainly seen, I mean, one of the trends, that we've seen is in our latest releases of our platform, we've had to work a lot on the user experience. As a technologist, for me, the fun part of it is one aspect of that has been in the warehouse. Most of the time, the keyboard and mouse is an enemy when it comes to shipping. You would like to not touch that stuff. You'd like to say, here's the inventory, here's the barcode, scan it, it's in the box, and it's out the door, and you never. So a lot of that user experience work we end up doing in the software is to say, well, you want to do all that stuff with one scan and you're done, so that you get through it without error. And that ties into what we just talked about. If someone has to come into the warehouse and there's only one way to do it, and it doesn't matter which carrier you use, and there's fewer steps, that makes it a lot easier for them to get that person up to speed. So. Anyone have any other thoughts when it comes to carrier diversification? I know that's the topics here of how to pick carriers, where they fit. I mean, one thought I had as a topics I just wanted your opinion on real quick was use of data in that choice. Anything you're seeing people think about as they evaluate it? I know we've seen a lot more interest in analytics lately. I think you touched on this a little bit, Amanda. Software these days has a lot of data. The question is, how do you get at it and how do you use it in decision making on it? So that's been a top of mind. Anything on the data front anybody's heard, or any insights on that from your customers?
Well, I can tell you that in working with many of the vendors, it's not just about the information and the data, it's about the insights and analytics that come out of it. And that's where you take information and make it actionable. And so we see more and more of the demand not being around, not just how do I print a label, super important that it's foundational, or how do I track a package, but how do I make that next decision about the next package? Back to the personalization and back to leveraging the entire range of my supply chain, right? And how do I meet the needs, the many needs of my different customers and internal stakeholders, right? So that's where the information is super important to have access to it, and then having the technology be able to bring it all together, and then that next level is really the analytics and insights that lead to action.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I've had more interesting conversations with customers lately where we're looking at some data of theirs, and you get a cross-functional team at the shipper, and suddenly, like, we'll spot an error. Let's say customers are rerouting shipments en route, or there's an address error that's being corrected, and the cross-functional team isn't really aware of this occurrence. The CFO may be saying, well, why are we getting hit with a residential surcharge? Why aren't we setting the proper residential indicator up front? It's costing us all this money because we're getting that fee later in the process. And the data was there. You just didn't have the right people looking at it to tell you that that's a leading indicator. You shouldn't be getting hit with that fee. You're not properly, figuring that out up front. So that gets to your point about actionable insights.
And you're right. And the key to what you just said, though, is who's looking at the information and the insight, because they're going to bring a different perspective, whether the finance person, the procurement person, the warehouse manager, whoever that person is, they're going to bring their own view to that data and those insights. And so when that communication happens there, and it's the team looking at it together, that's when it becomes super powerful.
Yeah, that, and you sort of you can creep into it. Your business can get pulled into it bit by bit. Like I talked to a customer last week where they used to do a lot of B2B shipments, and now they're doing more B2C shipments. And so they had in their process sort of a default setting to go non-residential. And as they added B2C, they didn't really change it. So suddenly they weren't saying it was a residential shipment, so they were getting dinged, and they weren't properly quoting it up front. It was nobody's fault, really. It's just that the business grew, their mix changed, and now they're getting dinged with that. So Vaughn, you guys are all about data and planning. Any insights on the use of data when it comes to this topic, peak season and end of year?
Yeah, well, I think Sean touched on that. Actionable insights are important, but you need a team of people to then action those things, right? And we're built around highlighting these actionable insights or things that people need to action to make sure that they have the right amount of inventory. Are we sitting with too much? Do we have enough buffer stock for these peak seasons? Are shipments being delayed, and what effect does that have on availability? All of that information and having visibility of that information as it happens, makes a business a lot more agile in correcting those things. So really, really important for that data to be presented in a way that helps business be more agile in this type of volatility, right? The demand is going to increase in this period of time, and they've got to be able to be agile during peak season to make sure that they don't sit with too much or too little, making sure that they have the right inventory as well, the right amount of the right inventory.
Mm-hmm. When you think about the impact that this what we're talking about can have, I've seen one of the best customers recently I saw moved a full point of cost off of their percentage of revenue spent on overall logistics and shipping. And they did it by looking at this connection of things we're talking about: inventory, the cost of accurately quoting the cost so that it could be recovered from shipments when you're charging it, picking the right service, and then in the execution, making sure that you don't have errors. So kind of this concept of planning and then planning driven execution that would connect that in a way that they took a full percentage point out, which could be, for a lot of businesses, I think shipping, would you agree it's a top 4 cost for most companies? Certainly top 5 when you think of facilities, people, cost of product. It's a top 4, top 5 item. So this is big money we're talking about. All right. Any other thoughts on carrier diversification, the value, where it fits? I know we're running close on time. All right, great. Well, let's see here. We have talked about, so I'll kind of recap here and give everybody a chance just to make some final remarks or ask any final questions that you'd like to talk about. So I want to just go back over a little bit what we've talked about. We've covered, our first topic was, let's say, supply chain congestion, the bullwhip effect, Disneyland, and we had a lot of good things, I think, that came out there. It seemed to tie back to better planning right now. And it doesn't sound like, Amanda, I think you brought this up, we're not going to see the end of that, at least this year. Maybe early next year, we'll start to see the end of it, but this bullwhip effect is here to stay. So that's one topic that we explored. The other one was parcel growth. So I think what I'm hearing from this group of experts, and I trust you all, is that it's still going to be a scarce resource. Double-digit growth, certainly through the end of the year. Probably, if you look at some of countries outside of U.S., if we got even closer to China at 50% of online sales and we're at 20%, we could expect another 50% growth in online sales, ebb and flow through the economy. So I think parcel growth is here to stay. So, which led to, I think, some of our discussion about diversifying your operations. Peak season, now's the time, right? We're going to have to acknowledge, despite me not wanting to do that, it's end of summer. Now's the time. We've got, it's September now, basically. So Black Friday, Cyber Monday is not that far away. It's coming out. So now is the time. And then we talked about carrier diversification, how to apply that in your business. So I think 4 big topics, lots of good themes. I will go around the horn here and see what additional thoughts or ideas you have. Here are mine. When I think about these topics, what I think I'm hearing and seeing is, number one, partnership is pretty key with your technology providers and your carriers. And now's a good time to reach out to your account managers in both sides and say, here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? How can we help each other? So that'd be one. Is I think partnership is a big one. The other theme that that I'm taking away from our conversation is early review. Now's the time to kind of do an audit, whatever you want to call it. Doesn't have to be a very formal audit, but look at your execution, look at your planning, and think about what you could do differently. And then the last thing that was on my list of ideas as we were talking was just an audit of the technology, looking at the integration between systems, and do you have the right data in place, and are you using it the right way to improve your operations? So those are my thoughts on what I heard. Let's go around the horn a little bit and get your last thoughts. Sean, you want to go first?
Gladly. So I would just piggyback on your last comment around the technology. And really, that's the opportunity, and as a lot of folks have said, to enhance what's being done already in your operations. How do you help the people do their jobs better so that you can get the better results for your customers? So that technology review, again, don't look at it as a replacement discussion. Look at it as an opportunity to be a force multiplier and enhance the process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great one. A force multiplier where your force is going to be multiplied at the end of the year as well. So you need both. So that's a good point. Amanda, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of, piggybacking on your partnership comment, I would say just keep the lines of communication open with everyone, right? With your technology providers, with your carriers, with your customers. People are a lot more understanding if they if they know ahead of time that there may be delays or what have you. So just, reach out early, reach out often, as often as it makes sense, and just keep those lines of communication open. And hopefully, peak season will be a relatively smooth one.
Yeah, I think it's funny that communication emphasis. I've noticed in a lot of the surveys and the market data that I read that shipping is kind of personal for people now. We all, everybody's got a story. Often it's a horror story, but sometimes it's a good story. When I got something fast when I needed it, but it's because it's so pervasive now in our economy that people have stories about shipping, which, I used to talk to people and I'd say, oh, I'm working in software around shipping. And they're like, what's that? That's not the case anymore. They immediately start telling their latest story about Amazon or something else where they bought something. So what I've noticed in that is people may not like it when the order is late, but they like it a lot more that you tell them that it's going to be late and when it's going to be there. Then they just live in a vacuum and they don't know what's happening. So that communication, not only with your partnerships, but being in position to tell people, to give them an answer or an answer you think is right, seems pretty important this peak season. Vaughn, what do you think? What are your thoughts? You get to round it out here.
Yeah, I think all really good points, and I think collaboration with right from inbound with suppliers and understanding what their constraints are, congestion in shipping and railway to get inventory into the right place, warehouse constraints, labor constraints, understanding all of that, and then outbound to the customer, as you said. Communication is key to understand throughout the supply chain. Visibility and collaboration is key, and technology is one of those things that can enable businesses to do that a lot more effectively. So, in agreement with everything that was said.
Great. Well, this has been a fun conversation. I want to thank everybody on the panelist team. For the folks that are in the audience here, we've been a partner with the UPS for a long time. These guys are the rock stars when it comes to delivery and technology, and Sean heads up that. So we're excited to continue to work with UPS on that front. And I'd encourage you to learn about the latest services and technology from UPS. There's a lot going on there, a lot of new stuff. We certainly see it every day. So thank you, Sean, for coming.
Thank you.
Amanda, same thing when it goes to the pulse of the media, the pulse of Parcel, the pulse of the industry. I know I read the magazine all the time and like some of the articles that you put out there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Today. And Vaughn, when it comes to kind of the partnership between planning inventory and figuring out what inventory you need in the right spot and then shipping execution, I think we see each other in the same places. So it's great to have you with us to think this through.
Thanks, Ron. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. Well, as we wrap up here, let me, in terms of follow-up items, there is access. There's a link here on a page here for access to more information about this series. We will also follow up from today's session with an email. You'll get an email with a copy of the recording. My name is Ron Lee. I'm responsible for the products here at 3G and PaceJet, and we would be happy to help you in evaluating any of your shipping software needs, as would any of the panelists here in any of their areas of expertise. So again, thank you for joining today's webcast, and we will be talking with you hopefully soon. Everybody have a great peak season end of year.